And we are back once again with the Think Fitness Life podcasts. We are three personal trainers that talk about mindset, exercise, and nutrition in the hopes that people start taking care of their health and make themselves a stronger version of themselves in keeping longevity in mind, right? Doing something today that will help you tomorrow, not just getting a really great workout today, but possibly hurting your health. So today we're going to be talking about meditation and kind of untapping the true potential of your mind. And I kind of want to just intro it a little bit. Um, there's a really cool video, and if you Google search or YouTube search, every monk knows this, how to literally control your mind. It just talks about your mind and awareness and how it plays a role in your manifestation of life. And if you can concentrate that and spend time with yourself, you can really establish and create the life you want to have. Um, Unfortunately, with the way that we all operate, is we spend more time getting better at the distraction piece than the concentration part. But take a listen, might hear some different insights, different experiences that you can relate to, and hopefully some direct um, practices and applications that you can try out. And for those of you who are just getting into meditation or want to get into it, there's two great apps that I've used that I really like. If you can look on your Play Store or App Store, there's one called Insight Timer, which I really like because you can kind of select how much time you have to meditate. Maybe you only have a minute to try it out in the beginning. Maybe you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes here and there, and you just can kind of expand from that. And there's another one called Calm, and I like that specifically for me. It was really good because I had a lot of like anxiety and a little bit of short fuse, so that was really good for me to help control that. So those are two great apps to look at. And then we're going to dive into meditation with my two co-hosts. And for those of you who are just starting to listen, they are Eric Menchie and Mike Urso, and these guys are geniuses. And I was very fortunate to meet these guys when I was just an up and coming young buck, little young grasshopper coming into the gym. And these guys just had such a good awareness and perspective on training and their scientific background and all the studies they've done, and or I mean all their certifications they've completed really allowed them to have such impactful experiences with their clients that I was just kind of always in the shadow of these guys, at picking their brain, asking them questions, and now I'm really fortunate to have them as my co-hosts on here. So let's hop right into it. Does anybody have any news they would like to discuss before we talk about meditation?
I do. So this was a couple months ago, but it came up on my newsfeed, and the title was "Freezing the Hunger Nerve." And they did this study of with obese patients that they literally took a needle and put it into someone's back to freeze the nerve that would create the hunger sensation in the brain, which is kind of insane that doctors are now going to this length of trying to freeze a nerve in the body to stop. And it showed results showed that people actually lost weight 90 days of just this one time freezing. But it just brings me back to like how many interventions do we need to really like stop us from just being overweight and unhealthy? Like you can just shut that down by like the whole fasting thing is just not eating when you're hungry and just training your brain. And I think that has a lot to do with what we're going to talk about today. But I just found it interesting that now we're trying to freeze nerves. So basically, what it all they did is they went through the back to the I think it's the posterior vagal nerve, and they froze it, and that shuts off the link to the stomach, all that stuff, and we're basically shutting down that axis of nerves going back and forth.
And does it shut it off like inevitably or just for a short period of time?
Just short period of time. I think just probably freezes it for a bit. I don't know how long. It didn't really say in the article. I would assume it's going to be like a cortisone shot where everyone's different, but it did show that people had results on it. But it's like you don't need this stuff or a needle in your back.
Right. Like, of course, the people promoting that study want to show how it has great and profound results, but I want to observe those people later in life and see if that weight came back because that nerve is no longer frozen, right? So to me, the first thing I think of is how um, records, right? The quality of sound from a record on a record player with the needle, and that old kind of cool looking microphone coming out, or I mean, horn coming out. That was the best quality of sound. And with technology and MP3s and computers and everything like that, we still haven't caught up to that exact quality of sound. So just kind of, I don't know, it makes me think of that because it's like we try to get fancy with it, but it's not nearly as good as just something simple as changing your own gut behavior and biochemistry through fasting and eating healthy, making better choices.
Right, but from a business standpoint and a, big pharma and, food industry standpoint, there's no money in treating root cause. And you're talking about treating root cause, but business wise, all these companies go bankrupt if they're not able to do a nerve freeze again when yours wears off, or give you another cortisone shot when yours wears off, or give you more medication when your IBS flares up again. All of these things are, again, treating symptoms versus root cause. And I think, again, going back to what our podcast is all about is looking at the longevity aspect of things. And longevity stems from treating root cause, what we talked about either the last week or a couple weeks prior, which is homeostasis and maintaining an inner balance of our inner systems, so that we are not, moving towards disease or moving towards further dysfunction. And that's like, again, doing a nerve freeze it's not changing your behavior, which it could be compounding all of those effects of what's actually going on from eating poorly or whatever is driving those issues to even happen in the first place. And so yeah, we've just got to go back and say, like, what we talked about the other week. It's just like we are the best doctor for ourselves. We can't rely on other people to try to fix us. Yeah, and so the issue with treating the symptoms versus the root cause is it doesn't change the behavior. And I just think, like, we have to be mindful of our behavior, and this kind of just ties into the whole meditation topic for today, which is so many of us walk around unconscious every day, just in these habit loops, just continuously doing the same things over and over, making the same choices over and over, same decisions over and over. And we wonder why we're stuck. Why can we not fix this? Why am I unhappy? Why can I not find joy in these things? And I think a big part of it is got to do with that, is us walking around in this unconscious state all the time. And our body is so conditioned to just continually, do the same things over and over again, because we're stuck in these habit loops. And really, it takes a lot of practice to kind of slow down and start paying attention to the feedback, to the signs, to your thoughts, and all the things that are driving the emotions that are, essentially making, cascading into all these bad decision making.
Yeah, you said a lot of great points there, and that's why I really liked there was a video that you sent out, Mike, about unlocking your potential of your mind. What was the name of that guy?
Yeah, Dr. Joe Dispenza. He's a chiropractor by trade. He started out, and then when he was, I think, in his early to mid 20s, he was racing in an Ironman competition, and he got hit by a car going like 50 miles an hour while he was riding his bike, got thrown and broke his back in, I think, 6 different places, needed to get a steel rod put in, but said, I'm not gonna get that done. I'm gonna try to heal myself, just using my mind, and went into, just deep meditation practice over the course of 12 weeks, and was able to heal himself and his body. And then from that point on said, I'm going to dedicate my entire life to understanding and to helping other people tap into their mind to be able to fix ailments and, kind of change their life. And so he studied neuroscience, he studied all these different areas. And so now what he does is he holds these meditation retreats. And he also has an online course you can do. And he basically teaches people using scientific methods that he's learned from different neuroscience, brainwave science, and basically teaches people how they can rewire their brain to, get over, health ailments, or get unstuck from, anxiety and depression. And just really, really fascinating stuff. And obviously uses the research of mindfulness and meditation to his advantage, but also knowing he's a quantum physicist, a neuroscientist, so he's taking all these different practices and blending them together to create a meditation practice that is extremely effective at rewiring the brain in a short amount of time. I just think it's really fascinating stuff. I've started doing it. My wife uses it. I'm seeing dramatic changes, just in my overall daily well-being. I haven't seen many physical changes yet, but I really think it's some fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna link these videos in the show notes for anybody listening. And again, these are two videos on YouTube that are really powerful. So, Dr. Joe Dispenza, uh, how to unlock your true potential of your mind, and then another video, Every Monk Knows This, how to literally control your mind. And understanding the two, one's a 4-minute video, one's a 30-minute video, but it's definitely worth your time because understanding the 2 points will really shed light on to how your behaviors as a human have conditioned you to the way you are stuck in your habit loops today. And then you'll also see how you can um, be in a state of happiness and sort of visualize that. And I think one key point I don't want to bring up is you know, Dr. Dispenza talks about your behaviors and how, you have an antecedent, a behavior, and then a consequence, and then that sort of starts the loop, right? And your brain and your body gets enjoyment out of familiarity and comfort. So once you have created um, that ABC connection, antecedent, behavior, consequence, and cycle it like that, it becomes comfortable. And when you try to get out of that, when you try to maybe experience something new, or try something for the first time, or get to a different space because your old behaviors weren't working for you, your body is going to, almost like a cognitive homeostasis, try to pull you back into that comforted of the old behavior loop. So you have to keep that in mind when you are trying something new, that it is going to be scary, that you may get feedback.
All right, we lost him. He's having some technical difficulties, but definitely like where he was going about the habit loop of him. When they try to break these habits, and people, it's harder than people think because the brain is looking to pick up that habit with something else. And I think in the video he says that, if you have, what's it, is it anxiety or like hate against someone, but then that someone like leaves the earth or leaves the world, like dies, your brain will figure out something else to focus its hate and anxiety to. Instead of breaking it, just tries to continue that loop, which is amazing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, how he described it was, if I recall correctly, it was with the mind. If thoughts are the language of the mind and feelings are the language of the body, then are we then able to control our feelings through our mind, and vice versa? And I kind of look at it back as heavy. I don't know if you've read the book Switch by Dan and Chip Heath. Well, it's one of the most popular psychology and self-help books out there about dealing with change, and essentially changing something in your life that's hard. And they use the term the elephant and the rider. And so the elephant would be kind of the body or the emotional being. It's extremely powerful. Like, our emotions overtake our logical mind all the time. And like you just said, our body is so conditioned to do things, even when we logically we want to change something, and we can say to ourselves we want to change. The body is so conditioned in these habit loops that it keeps doing it over and over the same way, regardless of who it's focused on. It's just because it's so well conditioned. And the logical mind, the logical, like the brain, is the rider, and that rider can direct the elephant. So these two have to work together. The mind has to steer the emotions. And if the emotions are left unchecked, they can just run wild, right? An elephant is so powerful, it can literally wipe out an entire forest, or an entire jungle, if it's left unchecked. And so this is why it's so important to, get the mind to quiet itself down, get the emotions to, first of all, quiet themselves down, and then give new input and new feedback to the body. And then it has to be conditioned, and it has to be repeated and practiced over and over and over again until those old habits are no longer there and these new habits have been implanted. But I think what he also says is, like, the magic really happens in the unknown. It's all this known that really gets us caught up in these habit loops and making the same decisions and the same choices. But when we step into the unknown, which is obviously scary, we've talked about that, like, do something physical to challenge yourself when you're stuck. This is all the same message, right? He's just explaining it in a different way. Whereas, going into the unknown is really where we can now open up our capabilities to, unharnessing, the limits that we put on our potential,
Yeah, I'll have to check the book out, but I like what you mentioned in is kind of like the emotion and logic, which goes back to kind of break it down. I think a lot of people, we get stuck in either our left brain or right brain, and that's what Mike's just said about the elephant and and logic and emotion is if you stay on one side too long, it can overpower the other side. And I think the whole premise of meditation is letting your brain get stronger and connection left to right side and being able to use logic but then emotion at the same time and kind of mitigate what comes in front of you. Am I right, Mike?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You want to be able to blend those symbiotically, like, together. I think, like, what a lot of his meditations do, like that. So I've done different types of meditations. I've done ones where it's just, focusing on the sounds that you're hearing, and most of these are with your eyes closed. How your body sensations are feeling. So just being present in the moment. His meditations are different. What they try to do is get you to disconnect from your ego, disconnect from yourself. So a lot of the cueing he'll do in his meditation will be, imagine the space, or take notice of the space between your ears in space. So not just, like, notice a area of your body, but notice that area of your body and how it resides within space. Which means, in order for me to do that and to see that, I have to step out of myself and envision myself away from myself, if that makes sense. And so what I like about that is it totally disconnects you from your ego, because the ego is the thing that ends up tripping us up all the time anyway. And so when you remove yourself from your scenario, and you look at yourselves as a much smaller entity in this big world, in this big space, we can now break out of our own little bubble and now see things from a different point of view, in a way of, like, we're all interconnected. I am not just, like, living in Mike's world, and all this anxiety is coming from all these different things that are, happening to me. But all these things are happening for me, in order for me to grow, in order for me to overcome, in order for me to have these challenges. And so it's a mindset flip, but it comes with that practice every day. But I love the idea of stepping outside of yourself and looking at yourself from the outside. It's kind of like an out of body experience, right? I really think that, like, that's why his meditations are so different, and why I like them is because it removes me from myself.
Now, when you do them, are they still, are you still, what kind of, are you still in the meditation like cross sitting or can you kind of just be standing and kind of get that almost like, is it like diving into your subconscious or like unconscious being and be like literally feeling you but like outside of you and through space and all that stuff.
Exactly. So it's experiencing yourself in the quantum field, and I don't nearly have the mental capacity to be able to talk about quantum physics and quantum mechanics and all that, because all that stuff is way over my head. Essentially, what it says is, the idea with quantum physics is that their possibilities are endless, right? Everything is either like matter or it's frequency. So when here's how Joe Dispenza explains it. So frequency is kind of like when all your imagine you're in a room and there's a bunch of ceiling fans and they're all spinning at the same time at the same speed, all in the same direction, and when they're all moving all together, it's almost like you just hear one sound, right? It's like a drone, like it's all like, but if you went into a room and there were all of these ceiling fans and they were some over here were like not bolted down properly and they're wobbling around, some are spinning on low, some are spinning on high, some are spinning the other direction, which is, by the way, kind of how our body is operating when it's all out of homeostasis and all out of balance. Well, then you get all this noise and all this chatter, and that's your logical mind just going in 20 different directions, thinking 20,000 different thoughts. Whereas the idea with the meditation and focusing on not becoming matter. Matter is that, the hard stuff, to becoming more of a frequency, and frequency is energy. So when you can become, and most of us are not energy, most of us are matter. And so when we can become energy and more frequency, what we do is the meditation allows us to become to that like drone sound, or those ceiling fans now start all spinning in the same direction at the same speed. And so now we become a frequency of energy. And when we become a frequency of energy, we open up a much more window of potential and possibility in ourselves and in our minds. Okay. I don't know if that made sense.
No, it makes sense because
Matt, welcome back.
thanks. I don't even know where I cut out. I don't know. I'm not sure what was heard, but it makes sense because like the videos that I've watched and stuff that I've heard about meditation and visualizing it is, you have, if you think of it in two different bubbles, one being awareness and one being your mind. Your mind has different sort of fields or areas or pathways, the science of it, and the energy is going to pull you to one of those pathways. Maybe you experience anger, maybe you experience happiness, and when you can get good at that concentration of focusing your energy in one of those areas, um, then what it sounds like is you're almost being better at being the frequency and rather than the matter.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And the frequency is what allows us to be able to kind of move through, the quantum field or through life, just not being like matter, not being like, a hard substance that's just banging up against everything, right? Which is kind of how we feel in a way. Whereas I think of it this way, frequency and energy, right? Did you ever walk into a room or someone else walked into a room and this person just had this energy and this aura about them, and they didn't even have to say anything, you just looked at them and you feel this like significant amount of energy that just entered the room from this one person coming in, and it's because that person is living in this heightened state, and it really kind of brings your level up too, right? Or I think of being on sports teams and being in that flow state. Being in that flow state is kind of being in that like fully conscious, fully like I am fully dialed into everything that's going on, both mind and body. And I'm just, whether I'm playing soccer and I'm just totally on point, and then other people around me, the whole team's clicking because this energy is just, just dispersing all throughout. I feel like that's a lot of the same stuff of what's going on. Like you can describe this in so many different scenarios that we find in life, but that's literally what's going on at the scientific level of this stuff. Now, again, I'm speaking here not as a doctor or anything. This stuff is completely over my head. So I don't want to proclaim that I really know what I'm talking about here, but I really am starting to just understand how there's really science based matters into how meditation and why meditation, rewires your brain. And obviously there's been studies. Harvard did the 8-week study, I think back in like maybe 2013, I want to say it was, where they, yeah, 8-week study where they actually did MRIs and EEGs for people like before and after this 8-week meditation training, and the increased the gray matter in people's brains like dramatically. And when you increase gray matter in the brain, it enhances your cognitive awareness, it increases your creativity, it increases your decision making capabilities. It's really like it is proven science that by settling down your mind and starting to focus on just very simple tasks, or just one thing at a time, how all of this heightened sense of consciousness can really make you happier, and kind of set you free from the shackles that some of our problems in life have on us.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, they just think meditation's like, oh, it'll clear your brain for 10, 20 minutes or whatever. But now that they're getting into the deeper science in the Harvard studies, people can now understand like what you're basically almost doing, like a bicep curl for your brain. Because another study I was reading about the corpus callosum, which is the basically like the transmitter from left to right. It actually is stronger, thicker, and more well connected in people who meditate. So now you have a brain that's functioning left, right side completely, and you're getting all the stuff that Mike just mentioned, and heighten of like almost all senses and everything, that now people can understand like this is more beneficial than we think. That it's not just some like something we should be doing and we don't be doing because we don't have time. Or even like yoga classes, when yoga is really meant for slowing everything down in this brain meditation, do we really need to be increasing intensity of all this stuff? But I think that's where a lot of people think meditation is just kind of like this, almost like this, like, what is it, like holistic, like it might work, it doesn't work, but it's shown that it does work.
Well, I think that's a lot of people who are practicing meditation in a wrong, well, I shouldn't say wrong, but in a poor manner, and maybe they're using meditation as a way to just empty their mind and do nothing, versus using meditation as a way of deliberate practice and deliberate thought and focus and concentration in different manners. Because kind of like what you're saying, like almost like a bicep curl for your brain, but just exercise for your brain. I mean, I was recently at a talk with listening to Emmett actually put on a presentation talking about capillarization, and the way that you're creating that capitalization in your legs when you're doing squats or lunges or something like that. You're doing that same thing with your brain in certain pathways when you're concentrating on the focus and awareness that you're trying to achieve. So when you're concentrating on being more mindful, when you're concentrating on healing your body, you're concentrating on being happier, you're stimulating those pathways more, they're getting used more, and you're creating more capillaries and connections in your brain, which is making your brain healthier.
Yeah. Now, Mike, you've done a lot of meditation. Before you started meditation, what would you consider yourself more like, more more logic, more like analytical? And have you seen like a change with meditation in that?
Yeah. Wow. Great question. So I am still extremely analytical and highly highly like if I did my Strength Finders test, the Gallup survey test. I don't know if you guys heard of it. It's one of the best like surveys that you can do to find out like what your top 5 skills are, and hard skills. And mine was analytical. So that was like that's just basically that's me. Like I can get to a situation where people are bawling and crying and like so emotional, and I'm just like, what's the big fuss about? Like, it didn't happen to like this, so and I overanalyze everything to a point where there's like it literally blocks out the emotional capabilities of me reacting. And so meditating, in a way, it's gotten, I don't want to say it's made me any more emotional. or improved my emotional reaction ability or decreased my analytical thinking. But what it's done is kind of like blended them together so that they work together better, if that makes sense. So, meaning I can respond to things in a way that is not overwhelming me, but also it doesn't disallow me to feel emotion. And I think that's the one thing I might have been lacking in the past was I tried to overanalyze things to almost like um, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Suppress my emotional reaction to things. And I don't know why I did it. It's probably something from my childhood, right? But I don't suppress it anymore. I allow the emotions to just flow, but I also am connecting it, with my logical brain at the same time as well. I mean, I practiced meditation for a year straight, pretty much every single day. I probably, out of 365 days, I probably missed like 10 days the entire year. I remember when I first started, and it truly did something to me. It rewired my brain. It allowed me to be much more cognizant, not to speak out of place a lot of times, and just be a lot more in tune with my emotions and not allow things to kind of run awry. And yeah, I do think that it had a pretty profound effect on me even to this day. And again, like you said before, or somebody said, it's got to be a deliberate practice. That's the big key. I think, Matt, you said that it's got to be a deliberate practice. And for me, I just fell out of practice for a while, right? My body just wanted to default back to what it was like before I started meditation, because my mind, and that's where I truly think you can meditate almost every day for a year, and it's still not going to undo those 30 plus years where you weren't meditating every day. Like, you literally have to practice every day, all the time, in order for you to rewire and reconfigure all those connections in your brain that are going to then help you change how your body then responds.
Because it's more or less, I was listening about like that, and what you were saying, like, you don't know how, but like, I was hearing like the intuition of what we learn when we're younger helps drive certain situations. So where you're more analytical, and so am I, where you suppress your emotions. They were saying that's almost the body kind of basically delaying your sympathetic system from going over sympathetic, and like basically preserving that homeostasis, so you stay in more of a analytical mind, so where you can basically oversee the situation and not go completely like fight or flight and drive others, where other people, they'll skip the analytical and they'll go straight sympathetic and they'll get into this high stress situation. And I think you're dead on, where it's like, yeah, you can meditate, but as soon as you stop, your intuition is going to go back to like, hey, this is what I've done, this is what I know, this is what I'm gonna do. And everyone's a little bit different. You could be more left-sided brain. I'm definitely more left-sided brain than right-sided. My emotions are a little more suppressed, but I think that meditation, like you said, that balance in the middle is kind of where we want to be. We're not trying to flip sides. We're just trying to just be see both sides of the roads at the same time, and be able to manage our like sympathetic, parasympathetic systems.
Yeah, I like that analogy of the almost in a way of not suppressing your emotions in a way that you're trying to delay going into more of an advanced sympathetic tone. I do think I feel like that because for me, I don't get over stressed out, and I didn't get over stressed out for many years because of that ability to not let my emotions kind of run amok and keeping things in check. So while I do have sympathetic moments, I'm probably much more parasympathetic. But I also think um, that it is important, to have both, like we had talked about with the homeostasis topic, which is, you have to have both systems because they do work with one another. Like, you have to have contrast. And I don't know, I may have been kind of too middle of the road with my parasympathetic. Like, I'm not too parasympathetic, but I'm not too sympathetic. And so because I didn't have as much contrast, um, it would frustrate other people. So for example, like my wife or people I had relationships with who, like, when an emotional something where somebody should react emotionally very strongly to, and I didn't have as much of an emotional reaction, it almost came across as like I didn't care. about the situation because I didn't have the emotional reaction that everyone else did, which wasn't true at all. In fact, I do feel like I felt, I do, many instances, I felt as though I did feel emotional and strongly. It just didn't come out in the way I expressed myself. And that's because of maybe my meditation training or maybe the suppression of those feelings. And I think what I'm finding with meditation is I'm suppressing the feelings less. I'm allowing them to come out, but I am also controlling them better with the logical mind because of my ability to take a step back and pay attention.
Yeah, and that's like, I know we talked about this in, I forget what episode, but the system 1, system 2, kind of like the mental training, where system 1's that like real quick reaction. Do I go sympathetic? Do I need this? Where system 2 is like a little bit more delayed, but it's more like thinking through and how this is gonna react. And I don't know if you guys read the book Thinking Fast and Slow or heard of it.
Daniel Kahneman. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's on the premise of those. It's like, can you? What I view meditation as, there's like you're finding that balance between system 1 and 2, where system 1's going to be quick right off the bat, but you could be wrong. Where system 2's more analytical and like, okay, I'm going to see the consequences, but takes longer to develop. If you can get in the middle there, you can make decisions a lot quicker, and almost like you're blending the two to make them more sound, so your body doesn't go into overdrive, or just like you're just like an emotionless person and people are like, well, what's wrong with you? Because I've had the same thing where people are like, you're not really emotional. But I think everyone's a little bit different on that. Like, they've studies have shown that certain people are left-sided of the brain or right-sided, and that drives how they react to certain situations.
Yeah. And also to that point, like when you do have somebody who's highly emotional and reacts to things with more heavy emotions, they don't, because they don't use that logical or analytical approach to dealing with those circumstances, they don't quite understand what it's like to then maybe have more of a Zen approach to it, or maybe a more calculated approach to how you deal or cope with those emotions. And I think that that's why it can provide some challenges with people in relationships and things like that. But again, meditation is kind of that bridge. I feel like that brings it back to have that more symbiotic relationship between both of those hemispheres.
Yeah, for someone like that, meditation could go a long way, because they're still getting that transfer, but they can become more aware of their self and their sense of self. And then they can, I'm thinking, like, don't correct me if I'm wrong, they could get into a sense of being more analytical of themselves and then the environment around them. So then they start getting out of that super emotional. Would that sound on the right side of someone for like who's really emotional during certain things, and how that would help them?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, most certainly. I think, and with meditation, like those people, and I've known people who have been highly emotional and then took up meditation, and what it's done is again, it's kind of it's slowed things down, and I think one of the things, especially with people who react with a lot of emotion to different circumstances, they tend to be people who are also very, I don't want to say self-degrading, but they also almost punish themselves, or they have these negative thoughts in their head that just keep looping over and over. They're very judgmental of themselves,
Like hard on themselves?
very hard on themselves, very like their inner judge is always like judging them and judging themselves. And so what I found is, like with meditation, what's one of the beautiful things about meditation is when you do it right, it's okay if you suck at it, and you have these thoughts when you're trying to just kind of focus on your breathing, but then these thoughts are coming in. What do I have to do later? What am I going to have for dinner? Oh yeah, I forgot I've got to call so and so. These thoughts are coming in when you're trying to just relax your thoughts. And then what ends up happening is like people start judging themselves and like, gosh, I just can't stop thinking about these things and I can't meditate. So they just quit meditation. They stop trying. And that happens to everybody in the beginning. If you guys remember back to the first couple times you meditated, like that's how it was. You know what I mean? You judge yourself. But the key to meditation is to turn that inner judge off, accept the ideas that are coming into your head as thoughts that are just thoughts, and then just let them go and move on, and don't judge yourself for saying I can't do this. And that's what the problem is. And if you can do that enough, if you cannot judge yourself enough, um, or I'm sorry, that much, what happens is you hit this kind of tipping point where the scales like tip, and you now are much more like connected, and you can now lock into your meditation and get into your Zen state a lot faster. And but again, it comes along with deliberately practicing it, sticking with it for a while. And I think that's the type of effect that is can be most benefited from the highly emotional person who reacts in highly emotional states.
When I first started meditating, like I had the same issues that Mike just said. It was like the first time it was just hard to get into, like I wasn't just falling right into like meditation. Like my brain was still going on thoughts, and I'd be sitting there like quietly, and then a thought would pop up like of something I needed to do or something, that was just imminent. And I'd start thinking, and then I'd catch myself like maybe 2 or 3 minutes in, be like, why am I dwelling on this thought? And then after a while, I kind of learned to just shut that down and just kind of listen to like the sounds around me and focus on my breathing. That would just turn down the brain waves.
Yeah. That's the beauty of what I like about Joe Dispenza's stuff too, and his meditations is we are all so focused on our own thoughts and our own ideas. And even when we're meditating, they're coming up. When we're trying to, we're not trying to suppress them by doing meditation, but we're trying to let them come and go without judgment. And what I love about his is what I talked about before, which is like entering into that quantum field and moving outside of your ego, outside of yourself, and focusing on areas in space or where you are in space with, within a part of your body within space. And so to me, when you get out of your own body, it's so much easier to not, because you no longer are now having thoughts about what you have to do or what's going on in your life when you're no longer looking at yourself from yourself. Does that make sense? Like you immediately then there's no more focus put on uh, you as Mike or you as Eric or Matt or any living being. You are now just part of space. You are just part of that quantum field. And that's the amazing part. What I like about his meditations is you can get into that meditative space a little bit faster because of his the guidings that he uses pull you into that quantum space, whereas you're completely removed from yourself.
Because I've always done it like the traditional, like, oh, I control the breathing and stuff. I'll have to see his check out his stuff and then really try to dive a little bit deeper into that. Um,
Yeah, I'll send it by you guys. There's two meditations he has on Amazon Music, and there's a morning and an evening one. They're about 20 to 25 minutes long. And if you do those, it's less than an hour a day. I've been doing them for about a week now. Really fascinating stuff. I mean, in regards, like I said, to get outside of yourself a little bit.
yeah, no, with those, is there any like music or kind of like sound involved with any of his stuff at all?
Yes. So this is a great thing we should actually talk about, which is brainwave states, because brainwave states,
Oh, yeah, that's exactly where I was going.
yeah, brainwave states play a huge part into where you are in that whole I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, frequency, right? That frequency is what we talked about. So, yes, how he describes it as when we are very unconscious, we're walking through life, we're worrying about our problems, we're stressed out, all this stuff's going on. Moving at a really high frequency, right? So we're like gamma, we're alpha, we're really moving at a high frequency, but we want to get down to like delta and beta, where it's going to be a much lower frequency, where our body now can now calm down and become more homeostatic, which we talked about, which is like finding that inner peace, that inner balance, where there's a much lower frequency to how our brain is operating, and there's not so much outside stimulation coming in. And when we lower our frequency and we get to that lower frequency state, obviously when we get in, I forget where we sleep. Do we sleep in like delta? Or typically where REM occurs, I want to say it's like delta, maybe I could be completely delta or beta. And then I know gamma is that kind of high cognitive problem solving, really high frequency. A lot of us live in that state all the time. And again, this goes back to finding that balance and that contrast. We don't really have it because so many people are on all the time. They're working, they're stressed out, and then they don't know how to tune down. And really, I feel like meditation, even just like 2 minutes of sitting down, turning off everything that's going on, and just like literally focusing on your breath for 2 minutes can bring that brainwave state down to a lower frequency and get you to not have all this noise coming in. And when you decrease the noise coming in, then you can now make decisions better. You can now stop. You can, when you feel an emotion coming on, you can control it a little bit more without going into an emotional outburst or letting it derail you into getting super stressed out. But the brainwave states play a big part for him, and specifically his meditations. He actually starts more in a higher brainwave state because that's probably where we're entering in. And the music in the background actually coincides with those different brainwave states. So as you go deeper and deeper into the meditation, the brainwave frequencies, those binaural beats that are playing in the background are actually decreasing frequency over time, so that you're being pulled and drawn into a lower and lower state every time. So I think it goes gamma, beta, alpha, theta, delta, which is our deepest deep sleep one.
And delta's where they say the what's it, the Tibetan monks get into,
Yeah.
where they're really really like this. But I've been, and why I asked this is I've been doing a lot of alpha wave meditation, and I'll do it with meditation. And sometimes even if I don't have like not the time to meditate, but more or less like the place, I'll just put it on while I'm reading or while I'm eating for 10 minutes. And when I take off my headphones from that, I'm just in like a different, I'm going to say different world, but like I'm just running on a different frequency, and I literally can feel my body like if I was an engine, I would be like 3,000 RPMs lower. And it's just an interesting feeling that I got the first couple times I was doing it. And now I'm kind of like, I don't want to say addicted to it, but like I look forward to like putting the headphones on and just running through the waves and just sitting there like calm and relaxing, and just kind of whatever I'm doing, it makes me focus better. It makes me concentrate and all that stuff. But I highly recommend a lot of people check out like I know there's on YouTube and Spotify, there's a bunch of these alpha playlists that you can get into this meditation brainwave. And as much as I like just meditation without sound, I've been doing a lot more of that, and I found that for me more beneficial. But I think that's a good point to bring up all those brainwaves, because people need to understand that throughout the whole day, like if we're running at high frequency, which high frequencies can be good at certain times, but we need to like fluctuate between them all, because they all affect how we learn, we function, we visualize, and what side of the brains are working.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing we haven't gotten into, and we now talk about brainwaves, but another big positive impact that research has shown from meditation is telomere length and the ability. And I mean, this podcast is all about longevity too. I mean, meditation has proven in scientific research to actually lengthen telomeres. And some people, like I know Joe Dispenza, for example, a 7-day workshop, they measure all of these things. So because he's a neuroscientist, they're not just he's not just doing this stuff and guessing at it. They actually know the types of changes that are happening in people's brains because they're measuring, like literally you sign up for a week-long workshop with him. They're doing brain scans on you during meditation. They're doing MRIs before and after to look at imaging of the brain. And what they're finding is that in some instances, they're increasing telomere length in people by 25% at the end of a 7-day retreat, just from meditation throughout like a 5-hour meditation every day. Like think about a week, you go to somewhere for a week and you can get 25% of your life back. Like literally increase your life by 25% because your telomere length increased that much. Like that to me, that's that's fascinating stuff. Like if you're not paying attention to that and you're not like, I'm going to go meditate right now because it's actually going to give me some life back, like you're crazy if you're not even going to consider it, because that scientific research is just so fascinating to me.
Yeah, and that just shows how much we need to literally shut our brain down and get it into a state of almost just like we talk about rest recovery and how to do this like nutrition and sleep. That shows that the brain is the most important. If you can just do that, you're going to add longevity. Like you're not even eating, spinach, kale, or healthy stuff. Like you're just taking care of your brain. I think that's like fascinating.
Yeah, well, the brain controls the body. It controls everything we do. The brain controls whether we turn specific genes on or off that we're predisposed to specific diseases. I mean, the whole field of epigenetics has to do with, just different environmental factors that can affect, gene sequencing and whether certain genes that may make you susceptible to Alzheimer's or heart disease turn on or off. And so, living in a state of, higher consciousness where I am not thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm going to be sick because I'm a certain age, but I'm keeping myself healthy because I'm doing this to make myself more healthy, and I'm eating better. And our brain controls all of those actions. And people say, like, I can't stop smoking. Well, yeah, but your brain controls your arm, which controls where it holds a cigarette, which the other arm, which has a lighter, which lights that cigarette. Like, your brain controls that whole process. And so this is the beautiful part. Like, if you want to stop smoking, get a better handle on your brain and control your brain and what your brain's capable of doing. And if you can get a handle on that, just like we said before, your possibilities are endless, like about the things that you're capable and the potential that you're able to create if you can get your mind to control some of the things that your body's doing.
Yeah, it's like how well are you controlling your mind, or is your mind just like aimlessly controlling you through, bring it back to the beginning, through just habits that you're just think like are hardwired or like you should be doing?
Yeah, the mind controls the body and vice versa. What you think consciously will be read subconsciously and thus manifested in your body. 100%. I mean, I wear a wristband that says clear your mind of can't. So for someone who says that they can't stop smoking, well, that's your first problem right there, is because you're telling yourself you can't do something. So now your subconscious and your body take a hold of that and they believe that, and you've manifested that just based off of a simple thought. So by adjusting the way you think, by adjusting your mind, you can do things. And with meditation, you can rewire and get rid of some of these negative thought loops that you might be stuck in, or behavior loops that you might be stuck in.
Yeah. And for you guys, where would you start people on meditation? Like, what if someone came to you and was like, what should I do first day? What should I do second day and the second week? Where do you have people start, or where would you kind of advise them to start?
Personally, I would say go to Dr. Joe Dispenza if you're ready to dive in. If you're so ready, if you believe meditation can help you, if you know and are open to the change, dive right in, go right to that beginning. If you're still skeptical, if you don't really even have the self efficacy to believe that you can do it, I would say start with the Insight app, or some type of guided video like that. But I really like the Insight app because you can set it for a minute, you can set it for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, and you can kind of dip your toes in, so to speak, to just see if it's something you can wrap your head around and handle. And I think that's a really great way to get people started, at least in the very beginning. And then once you've seen that, it can be beneficial, you've seen that you can flow with your thoughts and not resist things or push things away or try to quiet something, then you're ready for unlocking the true potential.
Yeah, agreed. I think, well, Joe Dispenza is great if you're interested in understanding the science behind how the brain works. I liked him, and I latched onto him and his meditation simply because he is a neuroscientist that describes how the brain operates. And for me, being that analytical type of person, I wanted to understand the function of the brain, to understand then why meditation works and why it's like once you understand the neuroscience and the like why the brain functions the way it does, it totally makes sense when he describes why meditation is the gateway to unlocking your true potential. But that being said, that may be a little bit too deep for that, that layperson, that beginner. And so two things. Matt, you said one, Insight Timer is great. And Insight Timer actually has a course. If you go to Insight Timer, download it and go to courses, learn how to meditate in 7 days. They have a course you can go through. It's 10 minutes a day. So if you don't have 10 minutes, I mean, I'm sorry, you don't have much of a life and you don't really care about changing. But if you do have 10 minutes a day, I would say use this. It's 7 days. It'll teach you how to meditate. It'll teach you how to breathe. Then it'll teach you how to, like what we talked about before, deal with those competing thoughts coming in and non-judging and trying not to judge those thoughts. And it takes you through that whole progression over the course of a week. So that's pretty easy. If you want even a lesser commitment than that, then I think Headspace is a great place to start. Andy Puddicombe, who started that, is a former Buddhist monk, and he started this app. I mean, it's probably the most popular meditation app that's out there. It's called Headspace. You can start it for free. They have a lot of free ones. If you buy it, it's like, I think, $10 or something for the year, and you can unlock all these different courses and other types of meditations. And but his very basic one is you can choose. You can do 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I would just say start with 5 minutes a day and follow his course. They get progressively harder and harder, where most of it starts with him guided and him talking to you and guiding you, and then little by little he talks less and less over time, and so that you're now more guiding yourself and focusing on your own thoughts. And so I like that because it goes back to how we know people change, which is making small incremental changes over time. And so I like that process that he goes through because it does implement small incremental changes that I think then cascade into much more bigger effect over time. So I like those two, Headspace, Insight Timer. And then again, if you want to go a little more into the science, Dr. Joe Dispenza's stuff is great.
Yeah, and if you feel like your mind is screaming at you, or you're somebody like me and you had a lot of anxiety and racing thoughts, and you just can't quiet it even in a minute of meditation or 10 minutes of meditation, whatever you've been doing, try the Calm app. That's another really good one that just uses more music and guided meditation to help move your frequencies along so that you're in a quieter headspace. But Mike, I'm going to make you in charge of reaching out to Dr. Dispenza, see if we can get him on here and pick his brain. That'd be awesome. I'm going to try to reach out and get a gentleman I was very fortunate to meet at my first gym I worked at, who trained with monks, and he, like, long story short, he had a plethora of health issues, but one of them was his whole arm was numb, like 24/7, and it was a pinched nerve in his spine, and they wanted to do surgery. They'd have to move his vocal cords out of the way, shave a millimeter of the spine off, or the bone off, so that it would not pinch his nerve, and he would have feeling in his arm again. But he wouldn't be able to talk for like 9 months. So he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do this like really deep meditation practice. So he literally stared at a ruler, looked at what a millimeter of space that he needed was, and he did this deep meditation practice. And after about 2 months, he regained the space in his spinal cord, and he regained the feeling in his arm, and he never had to have surgery. So I'm going to get him on here because he's a great person to listen to about his meditation practices and how they've changed his. But yeah, you need to get Dr. Dispenza on here. That'd be great.
Oh man, wouldn't it be? He just put out a new book. It just came out like 2 weeks ago. It's called Supernatural, and I think it goes more into the whole meditation stuff. He's got like 4 books I think out right now. The one I read most recently is "You Are the Placebo," and that one is really fascinating. A lot of scientific evidence, a lot of anecdotal evidence. But the newest one I think is called Supernatural: Unlocking Your Brain's Full Potential, or something like that. And it's really really, he just, to me it's so fascinating when you can take science and prove these things that people think are woo woo, or voodoo, and say, you know what, actually, no, this is like meditation works, and I'm going to tell you why, because this is how the brain operates. And I'm going to, show you, like, he literally has videos of when they're measuring, like, they're doing measurements of people's neurons in their brain firing and then wiring together into these networks. And you can actually see when they have a thought of something new, like when they're learning something new for the first time, or they're thinking about something new for the first time, those literally like those neurons fire, and then they all wire together. Like you could see them connect, and they form all these vast networks in the brain. And the more you think about those same thoughts, the more they fire and wire to these networks, and these networks get stronger and stronger. And I just thought, like, wow, like that's what's essentially going on when we're doing the same crap over and over again, is like we're just firing and wiring all those same, pathways in our brain, and we're making them stronger and stronger. And the more we do that, the harder it's going to be for those to disassemble, right, and create new ones. But knowing that and knowing the science of how the brain operates, we know that in order for us to change, all we literally have to do is think about doing something else and then actually do it. And I also thought what was fascinating what he talked about, which is when our body doesn't know the difference whether we're actually physically performing a task or if we're imagining it. So if you close your eyes and you imagine, doing some specific task, and then you actually do the physical task, they've studied the brain, and they've showed that the brain does the exact same firing and wiring sequence whether you're visualizing an action or whether you're actually doing the action. So you can literally, like, if you can't do something physically, you can literally just think about it and play it over and over in your head, and you're essentially wiring and firing and wiring these neurological connections that are actually going to make you physically capable. So it's going to actually bring these things into your reality over time. And so this goes back to the whole, all these athletes who are, they envision themselves winning the championship, or they visualize themselves doing some, scoring the game winning shot or the game winning goal. And it ends up happening because they've created this reality in their subconscious through repetition of practicing it in their mind. So it shouldn't be that, like, remarkable or surprising to us when they actually accomplish these things, because they've actually played it over in their head so many times that their brain has fired and wired that sequence, that when they actually physically do it, it already knows what to do. The body already knows what to do. You know what I mean? To me, like, that's the science to this stuff. Like, we actually have the answers on how we can change. Science has provided us answers on how we can change anything in our life. And all you have to do is, like, pay attention to it, and do some of the steps that we're talking about here.
Yeah, I'll put all this stuff in the show notes. Dr. Dispenza put in the video about the monk explaining awareness and concentration and the mind. But I think a bigger picture is, you know, Eastern practices would be looked at by Westerners as like magic or voodoo, and Western, we always would really need to see the science behind it. So that's why I think Dr. Dispenza is great, because he kind of brings the two together, right? Like the quantum physics side of it, along with the scientific data measuring people's brain waves and showing where the brain lights up based upon these different states. And I don't know if anyone's listening is a superhero fan or Marvel fan, but it literally reminds me of the Thor quote from the first movie where he's like, you know, I'm from your world. You separate magic and science. I'm from a world where we combine the two together, and it's true. Like there there's something to be said about just sort of um, trusting what the our ancestors have done. And meditation has been around for thousands and thousands and thousands. Yeah, and for us Westerners, to majority of us look at it as voodoo or magic or hoo-ha. It's really naive and ignorant of us to say all that without having experienced it first. So if you're one of those persons who's skeptical about it, go get the insight timer, do it for a couple minutes, and then watch a couple of these videos and hear what some of these other people have to say and how they've experienced it. And if listening to this hour and hour 15, whatever our runtime has been, hasn't convinced you to try it, then I don't know. I don't know what's gonna help you understand that this is something that everybody could benefit from.
So one of the other things that I was thinking about, because so I had a conversation with a client today who will remain unnamed. But they basically said to me, they've been trying to kick their sweet tooth habit. And in the past, it was Diet Coke. They had Diet Coke all the time, and they went to this hypnosis. It was a hypnotist group, and so it was a 5 hour long kind of where you just sit, and the hypnotist just gives suggestions to you over the course of 5 hours. And she went there, and she's like, I don't know how I'm going to possibly sit still for 5 hours. Like, I've never sit in one place with my eyes closed in a chair for 5 hours. Like, I just don't know how I'm going to do that. She's like, she was able to do it. And she literally, as soon as she left, she literally like would see a can of Diet Coke, and she had zero urge to have any, like zero urge. And even to this day, this is like a couple years later, she still has no urge. Like, she has cans in her cabinets and she will not touch them. She just has zero urge. And it's because of the suggestibility that happened, throughout the course of that meditation. A lot of it, and Dispenza talks about this, which is, we're much more suggestible when we're in a highly emotional state. Like, if you guys think about it in this way, when you're like something grabs your emotions, you're much more likely to like, fall into doing something that you maybe shouldn't have done versus like, stopping and thinking about it really strongly, and like, oh, am I making the right decision? And you're weighing all your options, like, and then you can prevent yourself from taking a step into something. But when we're highly emotional is literally when we're the most susceptible or the most suggestible. So a lot of the hypnotists are getting people into a high emotional state and then creating these suggestions. But that's essentially what's happening when we're making bad choices too. Like, these choices that were made are tied to some sort of emotional state that we're looking to achieve. Like, our body will recognize it, it's known, it wants to experience it. And like Eric, you said before, even if that person who is causing stress in my life disappeared off the face of the earth, I would still have the stress because my body will look for a way, because it's so wired towards that stress. It will look for a way to find it and replace it with something else. And that change doesn't happen until you use that emotional state to then rewire that whole process and mesh, like we talked about this entire time, the emotional and the logical sides together. But I just thought that was interesting, the whole hypnotist thing. And then so today she went back and she told me, I went again because she's got this sweet tooth habit. And sure enough, it's been like a week now, and she's like, I haven't had any urge to have any sweets at all. And she's like, literally after a 5 hour hypnosis event, and like she's completely cleared of feeling that. And I'm like, so we meditate in these small little short periods of like, 10 minutes here, 30 minutes here. I've had some of my strongest transformations when I meditate for like 30 minutes to an hour. And I think part of that is you're so deep in trance that your body is rewiring and is firing and wiring at uh, it's laying down like layers of these networks, like we talked about, like in that time period. So I can only imagine like what type of rewiring is happening over the course of a 5 hour kind of hypnotic intervention, right? It's just really fascinating. It doesn't come, in other words, it doesn't come as a surprise to me that the effects she had from it, are sustained.
Right. And you think like 5 hours in time is nothing. Like that's like a flick of a finger. But then you just made like a reference to like 10 minutes, and it made me think, well, like 5 hours in a state of like meditation or trance is probably huge for the brain. Cause like besides sleeping, when is it ever going to get there? And I think it goes back to like a little what Matt said about that quote from Thor. It's like, yeah, we have science and all this stuff, but like, did meditation and obviously meditation and brainwaves came way before really science was developed. And we had these, I mean, people were just like way, 100 years ago, we're talking like Galileo and Da Vinci were way ahead of their time in neurological function. It's like, how much do we go with science, and how much do we go like, well, what is this almost like physical like quantum theory field that we really don't know about? And I think that's where we're starting to get into, and it's more important than just like, hey, here's a theory, here's science, like this is what it tells you. Like if you go beyond that, you're going to get more. And that's, I think I'm going down that road now where it's like there's more out there in this microcosm of, the universe of, of how we function.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they say that kind of like the healing process or the therapeutic process of brain of sleeping, you know, to put it in perspective, is when monks meditate for 20 minutes, it's like we're sleeping for 2 hours. It's that beneficial of a practice to your brain. But without going too crazy into a whole nother conversation here, because I almost think we could save it for a whole nother podcast, because there's reports, there's a lot of documentation out there for people having out of body experiences in open heart or like open heart surgery when they die on the table and have to come back to life. And they talk about all these people having out of body experiences. And I've actually been fortunate enough to talk to some of the people in, one on one, and they'll talk about how, it was a complete out of body experience, how time is no longer variable, how just all these crazy things. And there's definitely something to be said for um, us looking at things in a anthropomorphic way, and we think that everything revolves around us. And then for those who can look at it and say, in that sort of that discovery mindset or that exploratory mindset of, let's see what's out there. And yeah, like you're saying, kind of the metaphysical and experiencing it, and just trying things, not necessarily needing the science to convince you to do something, but seeing if it plays a role into your life, and getting better at concentration and awareness, and getting to the space where you are your body's energy and frequency, and rather than just being the matter and being stuck in those behavior loops, being a drone, so to speak.
Matt, you talked about just sleeping a little bit ago, and it just reminded me of some advice that I was given from, just different meditation coursework and this and that, and which is when we sleep and then we wake up in the morning, right? That when we're fresh in the morning off of a night's sleep, our brain is very receptive to inputs and things that are going on. But like, what do most of us do when we wake up in the morning? We start thinking about what we have to do for the day. We start thinking about what we didn't get done from yesterday. In other words, like, everything we think about in the morning when we wake up is like reliving our past and living in the past. Whereas one of the best things we can do in order to try to, again, create the life that we want and the future that we want, if we can then wake up in the morning, and when we meditate or when we create a mindfulness practice, is meditate on manifesting those things that you would like to happen for you in the future, where you would want to be, the things you would want to have, the experiences that you'd like to discover. And if you can do that first thing in the morning, when your brain is in a position where it's completely rested and very open to accepting suggestions and ideas and creative thoughts, then doing that in the morning is one of the best times of the day for you to have that, those types of thoughts and those type of manifestations stick with you throughout the course of the day. I also think like it's important to do that at night too, to kind of cap off your night and get you ready to sleep and reset the whole system. But I think the morning, if I'm going to meditate, doing it before you do anything else is probably the one piece of advice I would give people, because it just sets the tone. And it's so easy to say, I'll get to doing meditation, I'll do it during lunch when I have a break, or I'll run out to my car, or I'll do it when I get home, and then crazy stuff comes up. If you do it as soon as you get up for like 5 to 10 minutes before you do anything, the likelihood that it sticks and the likelihood that it actually creates lasting changes with you that actually help you manifest what you want in your future, I think you're at your highest potential if you can, find the time to do it then.
I'll second that, because that's exactly how I incorporate my practice is morning, because that's like the time I find I have less distractions. It was easy for me to get caught up in doing other things. If I said I was going to do it later in the day or after my workout or stuff like that, like I just started in the mornings. But I do want to get into kind of what Mike does, where he goes for those more extended periods. And I like how you said practice it at night. I also observe a very impactful individual at my gym, Melissa Hartwig, who created the Whole 30. After her workout, when she's like most exhausted and there's so many distractions in the gym, she's meditating. She's sitting there with all this noise, all this craziness going around, and she uses that as a environment to strengthen her meditation practices. And I think I really admire that. Yeah. I don't know how much of my part of my rant in the beginning was heard. So I don't want to be too repetitive, but my closing statement is just find comfort in the discomfort. Don't resist any thoughts or push any thoughts away or use it as a way of ignoring something. You have to be able to flow with it. And I think one of the best visualizing pieces that helped me meditate was viewing it like water, and you might have a negative thought or experience in the middle of your meditation and just let it come in and let it go down the river, just like how the water's coming and going.
Oh, that's a good one. Mel Robbins has a great. She wrote the book, The 5 Second Rule, we talked about. She has a great one where she guides people through a meditation where you imagine a stream and leaves floating down the river, like one at a time. Yeah, and she's like, take a thought. If it enters in your mind, place it on the leaf and watch it float down the river and just float away. And I'm like, wow, what a great like vision. That's a great way to look at it, is creating some sort of metaphor.
In Zen meditation, the beginner's mind, another one they have is your breathing, because you're just breathing the whole time, and that's really like what you can hear in and out. Your breathing is the same thing as the flow, right? Like in and out. You have self, you have environment, self and environment, and just like a negative thought comes in, a negative thought goes out. Like the using your breathing as like a doorway in and out. And that wraps up the meditation podcast for today. Again, I'm going to put some stuff in the show notes for everybody. Dr. Joe Dispenza and some helpful videos. I'll put the insight timer, and follow us on Facebook. We have a Facebook group. If you're interested in our content or giving us feedback or anything like that. And if you have any questions, feel free to write us in, thinkfitnesslife@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from our listeners.